Thank you for tuning in to the Unjiggered podcast. If you enjoy listening, please consider subscribing and giving us a rating on your podcast service of choice. Also, don't forget to like and tag us on Instagram at unjiggered_media. Thank you to everybody for listening, and now on with the show. You're listening to Unjiggered, a bartender podcast where we interview highly successful bartenders about their careers, lives, and the passion of bartending. This week on the podcast, we have Ronan Keilthy, head bartender at 28 Hong Kong Street in Singapore. We chat about working as a zookeeper in Australia, the rotating concepts of junior bar, and leading the charge at 28 Hong Kong Street. With this podcast, we want to peel back the mask and discover just how the greats really became the greats, so sit back and enjoy.
My name is Ronan Keilthy. I am the current head bartender, head nerd, head crazy person at 28 Hong Kong Street.
Director of Human Relationships as well.
You can say that.
Cool. Lifestyle manager, what does that apply to you?
Yeah, lifestyle manager, listening ear, not professional. Yeah.
Professional. How are you today?
Yeah, fantastic. Always a pleasure to be at Mobar. Pleasure to be chatting to you as always.
So, you're a very, very young bartender. How old are you?
As of right now, I am 23 years old.
And we get a lot of old farts in here, so it's beautiful to see that there's some young people around.
It's the magic pixie lotion I put on my face. It's the secret.
So, talk to us about the beginning of your career. So, first of all, where are you from?
So, I was born and raised in Hong Kong. I was the classic example of the third culture kid. My dad originally is from Ireland, grew up in the UK. My mum is Peranakan Singaporean. And they were both working in Hong Kong, and they started a family, and that's where I was born. That's where I grew up. From there, I lived there pretty much till the end of high school, secondary school. So I was 18, and then the whole family relocated back to Singapore. I immediately dropped one set of bags, packed another set of bags, and went to live in Australia and the UK and South Africa. Before going to the UK for university.
How was your experience in Australia and South Africa?
Fantastic. I was there sort of pre-gaming for university for a study standpoint. I studied animal science and biology in university, so I was working as a zookeeper in South Africa and Australia.
So, if there is one place on earth to be a zookeeper, probably that's Australia, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's everyone has the stereotype of everything in Australia is going to be out to kill you, but that's what we were there for, so it was fantastic.
So, is the stereotype fairly correct?
If you look, yes, but day to day, if you're in the middle of Sydney, you're pretty good. So
okay, cool.
You're safe.
Just good to know.
But there's this one crazy guy working at a bar, has this coffee liqueur. You have to be scared about him.
Yeah, so. He will murder you, 100%. So, how was zookeeping? So, how does it work? What kind of relationship do you have with the animals? How does that work?
I mean, everyone has the idea that zookeepers do nothing but pet animals and play with cute things all day. I mean, my specialty is in reptiles, so to be brutally honest, reptiles don't really care about you. So it's actually quite a nice analogy for bartending where you have to win their trust.
Really?
Yeah.
A reptile trust.
Yeah. But no, it's super fun. You have to, it's not a career for everyone because it's physically demanding and you have to do a lot of hard work for not a lot of return. But I wouldn't have traded it for anything. It was one of the most incredible experiences of my life. And if the opportunity comes back, I'm not going to turn it down immediately. But right now, I think hospitality is quite good. So
how do you win a cold-blooded heart of a reptile?
You feed it and you don't touch it.
I never touch. Touch is a big no-no.
Well, you don't want to bother it. It's doing its own thing, so you don't want to interfere. The more you work with them, the more you understand their behavior, and yeah, you figure out how far you can push, how much you can get away with. But at the end of the day, it's more about keeping them comfortable. If they're comfortable, you're comfortable. Yeah.
Cool. So it's essentially a first date.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. Give a lot of food. Don't touch. Don't touch. Yeah. First date. Don't touch.
Precisely.
Exactly. Fantastic. And so, what made you think that was the kind of career you wanted to pursue at the time?
Well, for as long as I can remember as a kid, that was my interest, and that was the obvious sort of pathway that was set, and that was the obvious sort of thing that you needed to do to work in the position that I wanted to be in. So I did all that work experience in Australia and South Africa. Then I went to the University of Nottingham for animal science and biology. And that's actually where I started bartending, which completely took a left turn on my life.
So how was Nottingham for you?
Nottingham's fantastic, actually. It's a very underrated town.
Very different weather from what you used.
Yeah, very much so. I actually do miss... Actually, Hong Kong, even though it's not the coldest place in the world, it has seasonal difference, which I am missing a little bit in Singapore. And I was back in Europe. I was in Italy earlier this year, and it was very nice to have some seasonal difference. So it was very, 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 very welcome. But yeah, Nottingham is an interesting place because it's right in the middle of England, and it's a massive university town. And it's a massive junction for people, so it's actually very international for not being as big as Manchester or even London, obviously. But there's a fantastic culture of food and beverage, of old English culture, and obviously there's a bunch of students, so they bring their own thing every time they come by.
So what was the bar where you worked at, and what kind of experience did it give you?
So the first place I worked at was a place called the Hockley Arts Club, which is, I was on the opening team. It was an area of Nottingham called the Lace Market, where there's a high concentration of restaurants and bars. And it was a big 3-level, 3-concept venue. And that sort of gave me... as I said before, I've always been interested in fine spirits and fine drinking and cocktails and the whole cocktail culture, etc. But this gave me an outlet to apply other than making cocktails at home or drinking nice whiskey at a bar. And because in the name, Hockley Arts Club, it was more of club pace, not necessarily club vibe. So free pouring became part of my arsenal. Working fast, working efficiently, working cleanly. Those things were drilled into me from the beginning. I have to really, really credit the opening beverage director, Charles Rush, who is now actually... he's in London running a fantastic program called Liquid Intelligence. Mm-hmm. He does pre-bottled cocktails with his partner, Eleanor. And I can't thank him enough for giving me that opportunity and just sort of bringing me down to earth and giving me that sort of practical training in how to be fast, efficient, and smooth in service.
How long have you worked there for?
I was there for maybe about 9 months.
Okay. How did that turn out? Were you happy about it?
No, retrospectively, I think I'm more happy about it than I was at the time. For me, I was more interested in, at that time, with doing all this reading and knowing stuff about drinks and cocktails, I was more interested in making Negronis and old fashions than I was about making vodka Red Bulls and stuff.
Of course.
But now when I look back on it, that training has served me so much going forward.
And in terms of, during this period of time you were studying at the university, am I correct?
Yes.
So at what stage have you thought, is this the right choice for me, university, and am I supposed to be bartending? At what stage did you realize that, and what did you do?
Well, after the Hockley Arts Club, I moved on to another venue, which at the time of recording has been around for 20 years. It's a place called Brass Monkey. It's a bar in Nottingham that is not... at the time, it was industry hangout. It did everything sort of right, fresh juice and everything. And it produced some fantastic bartenders. People, if you're in Southeast Asia, you know Jay Gray. He worked there for a stint. If you're in the UK, Gareth Evans, Ali Reynolds, Kyle Wilkinson, they all worked there. So I moved there, and I was working there part-time, weekends and whatnot. And it was round about the end of my first year at university that I realized that this is something that I can do. This is something that there's a drive somewhere deep inside me that I can keep up. And I enjoy going into work. I can find things that interest me day to day. I enjoy taking care of guests. I enjoy ensuring that they have a fantastic evening. And because that bar there was no specific concept. It wasn't an X bar. It wasn't a gin bar or a whiskey bar. It was just a cool place to hang out and a fun place to hang out at the time. It was fantastic. So we had a lot of freedom and a lot of play with guests, and it was fantastic.
How did your family react to that?
Well, having an Asian mother, it was not easy. But I feel at the time I managed to justify myself. And thankfully, it actually turned out that later on in life, my mum went to open a restaurant. So now she's understanding the ins and outs of F&B. So
She kind of needs you probably as well.
Yeah. But at the time, they were obviously not the happiest that I was stopping a degree in hard science to pursue a career in hospitality. But I think they are actually, my parents are a couple generations older than I am, so but they are very in tune with what's happening, and they were very aware of the professionalism that was happening and the professionalism that was exhibited and the progression that could be achieved in this industry.
Mm-hmm.
So it took a little bit of justifying. It took a little bit of late night conversations, but
But eventually happened, which is cool, right?
yeah.
So at what stage have you thought, okay, it's time to move to Singapore? Because at this stage you're working in Nottingham, right?
Yes. So my whole family relocated to Singapore after Hong Kong, and at the time there were my grandmother, on my mother's side was not in the best of health. She's all right now.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was properly, when I made the decisions, like, this is what I'm going to do, this is how I'm going to go forward, my parents actually being very supportive is like, sure, we'll support you, but I think it's best if you're closer, that it makes a bit more sense. And we can provide a bit more support, or just like, if stuff goes wrong, you're not on the other side of the world.
Which makes sense, yeah, absolutely.
So I moved back end of 2016, and in the interim period, I was talking to a couple of friends, Peter Chua and Zach de Git, who were in the process of opening a new venue at the time called Crackerjack, part of the Proof Collective, which was a full day service, coffee, breakfast, lunch, dinner, cocktails venue with a satellite bar called Junior, which was 10 seats. It still is 10 seats. It's now operating independently, and a rotating concept. So that's where I joined immediately, pretty much as I came in.
How was Crackerjack?
Crackerjack was fun, incredibly fun. I'd never worked day service. I'd never done that whole... Because there were three teams, essentially. There was the very small coffee team, there was the kitchen team, and there was the rest of us. The rest of us did floor, bar, everything, reservations, etc. And I always value a generalist sort of mentality to doing anything, because I feel that gives you more opportunity if you're more generalized. That was a massive learning curve, but a fantastic experience. The team is one of the things that I miss the most about Crackerjack. We were all diverse, so it wasn't like 7 of the same people, which can be tricky. But overall, it was a fantastic learning experience, and I wish something like that could occur again in Singapore, and it has with the rise of other bars like No Sleep Club, that sort of stuff. It's been coming up.
How about Junior? So you worked in Junior. Would you like to talk to us about the venue? You said it's a 10-seater bar, right?
Yep.
Yeah, and how does the menu work? How often do you change the menu?
So Junior works as a small bar, as you said, 10 seats, and every 6 months it's a completely new concept. Not just a new menu, but the bar gets stripped down and rebuilt every 6 months. Initially, it started as part of the Proof & Co. collective, as a sort of petri dish incubation area for concepts, but now it's become its own thing and become more independent. So up until now, now it's in its 5th concept. It initially started out as Norma. So it's sort of like an art gallery. So you have the name of the gallery, which in this case is Junior, and then you have the name of the installation, which is the name of the bar that happens inside. So initially it was Norma, which was an agave spirits and cocktail bar. We had nothing on the back bar that was not made in Mexico, not from an agave plant, except for Sotol. It was more about the spirit. And the second one was Magnolia, which is inspired by New Orleans and the cocktail culture there. The third one was Pacifica, which is a tiki bar. The fourth one is Petit Chalet, which is a Alpine Lake Tahoe 1970 ski lodge. And right now it is the House of the Dancing Lion, which is a little Chinese New Year pop-up. And then it'll be moving into its next concept soon.
And how did you guys rotate concepts? Like, who comes up with the idea, and what's the logistics behind it? Because it seems like it's a quite elaborate process, right?
Yes, it's sort of a never-ending cycle. We all pitch in ideas. I don't so much anymore. I'm more at 28, but when I was there, we were all constantly sort of thinking of new ideas, and it's an interesting journey because it's a bar with a 6-month lifespan. So the first 3 months are making sure it can stand on its feet, and the second 3 months are trying to think of the next concept. So we had a pool of ideas. We kind of knew what we wanted to do, and there's always ideas being thrown into the hat. So at that sort of 3-month mark, we sort of figure out, okay, guys, it's time to think of the next concept and start punning it out. And then the actual turnover, physical space of decoration and whatnot, is 3 days, which is sometimes tough, but generally doable for a 10-seat bar. But the work on the drinks, the work on the concept, the menu, the food, because Junior does food as well, starts at that 3-month in on the previous concept.
So after Junior, you moved to 28 Hong Kong Street, but I think it's important to mention the fact that at the present stage, they're managed by the same company. Am I correct?
Junior currently is separate from 28 Hong Kong Street and the Proof Collective. It operates outside, but when Crackerjack closed, the space has now been turned into the Proof & Co. headquarters. So it's physically attached to Proof, but it still operates as a semi-independent bar.
Okay. So do you share team members or not really?
Very occasionally, but not as a rule. The last full-on share of team member was myself. For a good 10 months, I was bouncing between Junior and 28 in the middle of the week.
After how long you left Junior for 28? I mean, plus, I'm assuming you had this transition period where you worked both bars. Am I correct?
Yeah. It was sort of when 28 was sort of coming into a new era, because 28 Hong Kong Street has been open at the time recording for 8 years. And in any venue or any company that's been open for 8 years, there's team changes, things happen. So it was, when I moved over fully to 28, there was a full-on team change. So that was probably the best time, and a lot of work needed to be put in to 28. So we felt that it was better to have most of my effort and focus
in that specific project.
Yes, precisely.
So would you like to talk to us about the current state of 28 Hong Kong Street? So what kind of focus do you have with the menu, music, vibe, general spirit selection?
Yeah, so 28, as I said earlier, has been open for 8 years. It was one of the first proper cocktail bars to be opened in Singapore at the time. There were a few places that were doing fantastic things with cocktails previously, places like Bar Stories and Tippling Club. They've been open for longer than us. But as a standalone, we do cocktails type bar, 28 was one of the first. We opened on Halloween 2011. And
good date.
Yeah, very good.
Easy to remember.
Precisely. And we've just, the long and short of it is we've always just tried to present good things to people, like be there for people. We're not one bar, we are not a gin bar, we're not a whiskey bar, we're not XYZ, we don't have a super focused concept. We just want to be the clubhouse. We want to be a good bar. We want to be a bar where people are comfortable hanging out early and late. People can come in and have a beer and a burger, or they can have a ridiculous cocktail from the 1920s that no one's heard about, or have a whiskey that's only produced 3 times a year. We don't have everything, but we at least have something for everyone.
And how do you come up with the spirit selection? Because you mentioned you have quite unique spirits there. How do you go about sourcing them?
Yeah, well, the fact that we've been open for 8 years and we've had a very very, very, very good group of friends and close regulars. We get people bringing stuff in every time. It's the generalist mentality. We try and provide for as many people as possible. So we will have as many standards. If you want XYZ, like you'll see familiar labels on the back bar, but we also try and be interesting about it. We try and provide a unique take. We have a very large back bar. If you've ever been into 28, like you are presented with a legitimate wall of alcohol, but we always try and have something that's a little bit different. Not to step on or deride any other products, but we want to introduce people to new opportunities and new flavors and new sensations. So I mean, this is one of the things that we take consideration of. We always put new spirits and new cocktails through the why test. It's like, why does it exist? Is it like a cult classic? Is it a purely representative of a style? Is it super rare? Does no one else have it? So there's a lot of things that go into it, but we just want to give the best variety and also the best opportunity to access certain spirits.
And about the spirit selection, do you rotate a lot, or do you have like things that like just sit there for quite a while? So once you make a decision that the spirit is there, is it semi-permanent, or do you try to keep it reasonably seasonal, like air quotes seasonal?
It depends. Like there are some things that we will always have. Like there are some things that I personally feel that are just fantastic examples of categories, and some things that will sort of like pay their rent sort of thing. But with brands and expressions that have a lot of different expressions and a lot of different SKUs essentially, then it's more viable that we'll keep a brand but rotate the expression. So if it's Bricklatic or Kenobi, they have a bunch of different expressions in their range. We will always have a Bricklatic or Kenobi, but we'll rotate what they have. There are some things that are so exemplary of their category that are sort of difficult to replace. Like Monkey 47 and Hendrix, for example, like they're so unique and outstanding in their category, and so many people ask for it. And we don't want to be that place that's like, oh, we don't have XYZ, because that's alienating, and we don't want to alienate anyone. If you want a Monkey 47 or a Hendrix and Tonic, go ahead. If you want a Balvenie 12 on the rocks, we'll always have Balvenie 12. But like in the areas where it's that sort of gray area between known and unknown, that's where we have that freedom to rotate and introduce people to something that may become their new favorite.
How do you manage accessibility? Because of course you have your staples, you mentioned your Hendrix, Monkey 47s and all that, but how do you make sure that your guests who come in, they have access to those lesser known spirits and they get to try them, and so how do you develop this relationship? What tools do you use? Well,
the two things that I feel are very, very important with selling spirits are pricing and team knowledge. The pricing can't be too ridiculous, because then that shuts off from a purely numerical standpoint. Like maybe you love whiskey, but you're not in the financial situation to buy a $200 shot of whiskey. Appropriate pricing makes things accessible, and at the end of the day, the producer made that booze to be drunk, not sat on a shelf and accruing value over 50, 60 years. So we try and price things approachably, yet with good intention. And also just getting the team to sort of understand what people are looking for and what things on labels mean or what things taste like. It's difficult to sell a super heavily peated Islay whiskey to someone who likes really light Japanese whiskey, but if the team has enough knowledge to know those stepping stones to the progression of the guest's experience with drinking whiskey, then that will extend the guest journey a lot more.
How is the team structured there? How many bartenders do you have, and how many people on the floor, and who works where?
So right now we have about 5-6 bartenders, 4-5 full-time floor staff, and we have part-timers coming in. But all full-timers, regardless of bar floor kitchen, they all come in and participate in training. So even though it's not directly sort of affecting the job scope, any information's good information. So
I agree with that. Yeah, absolutely. And what tools of how many trainings do you do? How does that work?
So every Tuesday we do a training session, and with Proof and Company right now, who's the company that runs 28, they have a training platform called Jerry. We use that as our textbook. So we'll tackle a certain subject over the course of 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks, depending on how elaborate the subject is. And we'll use courses on Jerry, which is an online learning platform, to supplement that. And we'll bring people in, we'll do live tastings, we'll do interactive, like how things work in cocktails. Because I feel like learning, like I'm personally, I'm a massive nerd, so I can sit and read about stuff all day and not taste anything and not make a drink. And it's like, okay, cool, I have the information. But for some people, it's like, if you're talking about the ester count of a Jamaican rum, not everyone's really going to give a crap. But if you put that into practice, like, oh, this is what this tastes like, this is what it tastes like in this cocktail, then it'll click with them and it will keep in their head. So when it comes time to recommend such things to guests, they're armed with that knowledge. And knowledge is the most important tool for a bartender. Like,
yeah, being about drinks or being about human relationships, being a bit about everything, right?
No, exactly. Like, if you think about it from behind the bar standpoint, every product behind that bar as a bartender, they're your co-workers. So if you know where your lemons come from, like what you're pouring, like how you make your ice, how you make your cordials, that is important. It's incredibly important because that they're your co-workers. That's how you make them shine. And on the other side, like, you don't want to alienate your guests again. Like, you want to be aware of what's happening in the world, so you have something to connect to them, because not everyone really gives a crap about the ppm of their Isla whiskey. So you need to get in there and you need to talk to them like actual human beings.
Now, we talked about Jerry a little bit, which is this online platform, but what other tools do you use to supplement that knowledge?
Well, me personally, I'm pretty agnostic about media. So I can read a book, I can watch a video, I can listen to a podcast, and that works fairly equally well for me. But it's also about understanding how you are as a person. Like, some people learn better from video, some people learn better from audio, some people learn better from practical, and some people learn better from text. So I think the first thing to realize is how you learn. For me personally, even though, like, most things are okay with me, like, I can comprehend and digest most forms of media, audio and visual are always the best. Because seeing things and hearing things, it just sticks better. So YouTube, it's the best search engine out there, because you get visual, audio, get everything. Like, more like, if you're asking people how they change a light bulb or fix a car, people will YouTube it before they Google it.
Yeah, that's true. And a lot of times, actually, I've realized that when you search for things on Google, you don't get the result that you're looking for. But then when you search the same thing on YouTube, you actually get the process that you were looking for.
Yeah, and it's also like the vetting process is a lot quicker because you can see what's going on. You don't have to read a whole article to figure if it's worth it for you.
Yeah, exactly. Then there's this beautiful thing where if you do it on your phone, you can double tap to skip 10 seconds. So you can just basically skip through it, right?
Yeah. In summary, I feel like the best way to learn is figure out how best you learn and then seek that out. Like, nowadays it's 2020 when we're recording. It's 2020, so there's books, there's websites, there's podcasts, there's YouTube videos, there's TV shows. Like, the world of media is laid out for you. So, and there's equally good and bad information in every single format. So
Indeed.
It's also about, like, figuring out where best to find your resources, because there's nothing more frustrating than reading an entire book and then reading something else where it's like, oh, that book was all bullshit. And it's like,
yeah.
damn.
And in terms of, like, product knowledge, because, like, okay, we talked about general knowledge, like how whiskey is made, how wine is made. In terms of like product specific knowledge, like new releases, how do you keep yourself in the loop?
I mean, I have to say I'm very, very lucky to be working in Singapore because right now the bartending community is very, very tight and it's very, very communicative and communicative. Everyone's sort of in it for each other, and like as you're very aware, like we have chats that can sometimes be a little annoying at times, but at the end of the day, when you need an information, it is hashtag faster than Google. So yeah, I feel right now in Singapore we're super lucky because the community right here right now talks to each other very freely. I feel we have WhatsApp chats, we have Facebook groups, which can sometimes be kind of annoying, but at the end of the day, they are faster than Google.
Yeah, and especially like when it's like distributor related information, like those things that you only know, like ungoogleable things, you know.
Yeah, and those distributors, those brand ambassadors, those brand managers, sorry, they are part of the group as well. Like it's wider reaching than just bartenders, so they have the opportunity to post that information. And also getting to know your local regional ambassador or brand manager. You don't have to be at their beck and call, but like just they're humans too. Like form a good relationship and like share information. And it's like, hey man, you got anything else in the works? And they're oftentimes more than happy to provide you with information about what's happening. And being updated and being in the know is always beneficial. I can't see any way that being up to date with information is not gonna benefit you.
Indeed.
Like nowadays, the knowledge gap between customer and bartender is getting smaller and smaller by the day. There was a point where bartenders were the enlightened few who studied and learned, and customers maybe were not super up to speed with what's happening with cocktails and fine spirits. But nowadays, the access to information for everyone is fantastic. Like,
indeed. Consumers as well. Yeah.
No, exactly. Right. People are drinking better. People are drinking more proper. So just to be able to assist, like the worst thing that can happen is you use this information to sound better than someone. You use this information to help someone. Like you don't have a friend who's a doctor coming up to you and saying what you're doing wrong with your lifestyle. But if there's something wrong with you, you're quite happy to have that friend who's a doctor who knows things.
Yeah, exactly.
So you don't want to be imposing your viewpoints and information on people, but if people ask, you want to be there with that information because that makes everyone's life a lot easier.
What's your go-to spirit category?
Cane, grain, agave.
Yeah?
Yeah, one of those three.
Like talking about agave, for instance, do you have a specific style of agave spirits that you like?
It's hard. Like I get asked, "What's your favorite?" and I've stopped believing in favorites.
No, I don't have favorites either. But there's like a couple of styles. Like my go-to category is probably whiskeys, and I have a few categories or whiskeys that I really enjoy, like in terms of style. I was wondering if you had the same.
Yeah, no, well, for me, in agave spirit specifically, it's tequila mezcal. I do love raicilla, bacanora, sotol, but right now I have not tried a variety enough to have that so cemented in my palate. But like, it'll be a tequila mezcal if I want light or dark.
How would you recommend for someone to get into the category? Like, how would you drink your tequilas, for instance?
It depends on what you're used to drinking. Like, if you're used to drinking neat spirits, have it neat or on the rocks. Or if you're used to drinking old fashions, have it in old fashioned or Manhattan. But if you're new to it, like, that's the thing. The nice thing about cocktails, it's sort of, you can use what you like to your advantage. So if you're unfamiliar with the spirit category or a flavor, there's usually a broader format that can help you. So if you like daiquiris, have a Tommy's Margarita. It's very easy. It's a very similar flavor profile.
I think this leads us nicely into our last question. So if you could choose your very last drink, what would that drink be?
Alcoholic or non-alcoholic?
No, you can choose anything. You're about to be executed. You're on an island by yourself, and you can access any drink that you can possibly wish for.
It would probably be an incredibly funky mezcal or an incredibly funky Jamaican rum, because I know I'll be tasting that for the rest of eternity.
Whoa, that's a deep cut, man.
Yeah.
It was awesome to talk to you, man.
No,
Thank you so
pleasure.
much for giving us some insights on how 28 and junior work.
Oh.
And looking forward to having you serving me a drink.
No, always a pleasure to be at your service, sir. And thank you so much for inviting me on. It's been a pleasure. You guys do amazing stuff. And I'm very honored to be a part of this podcast and a part of the group of amazing guests that you've had on.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
We hope you enjoyed our interview with Ronan. We are Unjiggered_media on Instagram, and you can follow our personal accounts at mmariotti89 for Michele, Alex J. Murphy for myself, and Adrian Bessa for Adrian. Thank you for listening.